Elijah's story begins during a tumultuous time in ancient Israel. King Ahab, who reigned over the northern kingdom of Israel, married Jezebel, a Phoenician princess who worshipped the god Baal. Under their rule, idolatry and immorality spread throughout the land, leading to a spiritual decline among the Israelites. In the midst of this corruption, God raises up Elijah as a prophet to confront the wickedness of Ahab and Jezebel. Elijah boldly proclaims God's judgment upon the land, declaring a severe drought as punishment for the people's idolatry. As the land suffers from the drought, then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. "Leave here, turn eastward and hide in the Chariot ravine." And so he did, where God miraculously provides for him by sending ravens to bring him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. After a time the brook dried up, and God instructs Elijah to go to Zarephath, a town in Sidon, to stay there. God directed a widow to supply him with food. So Elijah went to Zarephath and met a widow who was gathering sticks. He called her and asked her to bring him water and a piece of bread. "As surely as the Lord your God lives," she replies, "I don't have any bread." Despite their desperate situation, Elijah tells the widow to trust in God's provision. Miraculously, the widow's jar of flour and jug of oil never run dry, sustaining them throughout the duration of the drought. Sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and finally stopped breathing. Elijah took the child in his arms and carried him to his room and laid him on his bed. He then cried out to the Lord. The Lord heard Elijah's cries, and the boy's life returned to him and lived. Meanwhile, back in Israel, the drought worsens, and Ahab sends his servant Obadiah to search for Elijah. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him and bowed to the ground. Elijah said, "As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." When Ahab saw Elijah, he said to him, "Is that you troubler of Israel?" "I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have." Elijah replied, "Now, summon the people from all Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." And so Ahab did. On Mount Carmel, Elijah proposes a test. Each side will prepare a sacrifice, and the God who answers by fire will be recognized as the true God. The prophets of Baal go first, calling upon their God with fervent prayers and rituals. They called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted, but there is no response. At noon Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears until their blood flowed. There was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Now, Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, and built an altar. He dug a trench around it and arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. He ordered the people to fill their jars with water and pour it on the wood 3 times. And then Elijah prays to God. Immediately fire descends from heaven, consuming the offering, the wood, the stones, and even the water in the trench around the altar. Witnessing this miraculous display of divine power, the people of Israel fall on their faces and declare, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Elijah then commands the people to seize the prophets of Baal, and they are subsequently slaughtered at Elijah's command. Despite this victory, Elijah's triumph on Mount Carmel incites the wrath of Queen Jezebel. She sends word to Elijah, threatening to kill him within 24 hours. Fearing for his life, Elijah flees into the wilderness, where he despairs and cries out to God, feeling alone and abandoned. In his moment of weakness, God ministers to Elijah all at once. An angel touched him and provided for him food. And Elijah ate and drank and lay down. The angel of the Lord came the second time and provided for him again. Strengthened by this encounter, Elijah traveled for 40 days and nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. And God told Elijah to travel to Damascus, where he met Elisha son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. and Elisha followed Elijah to be his servant. Sometime later there was an incident involving a vineyard belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard was in Jezreel, close to the palace of Ahab king of Samaria. Ahab said to Naboth, "Let me have your vineyard to use for a vegetable garden, since it is close to my palace. In exchange I will give you a better vineyard, or, if you prefer, I will pay you whatever it is worth." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my ancestors." Then Ahab went home, sullen and angry because Naboth the Jezreelite had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my ancestors." He lay on his bed sulking and refused to eat. His wife Jezebel came in and asked him, "Why are you so sullen? Why won't you eat?" He answered her, "Because I said to Naboth the Jezreelite, 'Sell me your vineyard, or if you prefer, I will give you another vineyard in its place.' But he said, 'I will not give you my vineyard.'" Jezebel, his wife, said, "Is this how you act as king over Israel? Get up and eat. Cheer up. I'll get you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, placed his seal on them, and sent them to the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city with him. In those letters she wrote, "Proclaim a day of fasting and seat Naboth in a prominent place among the people. But seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring charges that he has cursed both God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death." So the elders and nobles who lived in Naboth's city did as Jezebel directed in the letters she had written to them. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth in a prominent place among the people. Then 2 scoundrels came and sat opposite him and brought charges against Naboth before the people, saying, "Naboth has cursed both God and the king." So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Then they sent word to Jezebel, "Naboth has been stoned to death." As soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned to death, she said to Ahab, "Get up and take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite that he refused to sell you. He is no longer alive, but dead." So Ahab got up and went down to take possession of Naboth's vineyard. During their time together, Elisha witnessed Elijah performing various miracles, such as providing for a widow and raising her son from the dead. These miracles served to strengthen Elisha's faith and confirm his calling. As they traveled together, Elijah eventually offered to part ways with Elisha, but Elisha remained steadfast in his determination to stay with him. Before Elijah's departure, he asked Elisha what he could do for him before he was taken away. Elisha requested a double portion of Elijah's spirit, which Elijah said would be granted if Elisha saw him being taken away. As they were walking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha picks up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and stood on the banks of the Jordan. He strikes the waters with his cloak. Elisha, now filled with the spirit of Elijah, carries on his mentor's legacy, performing miracles and continuing to proclaim God's truth throughout the land. Elijah's departure marks the end of an era, but his legacy lives on as a testament to God's faithfulness and power, inspiring future generations to serve the Lord with unwavering devotion. Did you like the story? Please watch more on our YouTube channel. Like, share and subscribe. May God bless you.